Welcome everybody. Today I wanted to talk a bit about how I became a caster, since I've been asked the question a lot in the last few days. So I want to talk about it a bit in this video today, and especially of course about how it all began. My casting career, if you so want, started actually in WarCraft 3, and that was like a long time ago. That was in 2002, I think, 2001, around that time. And back then the entire casting scene was completely different from what you know today. I mean, the only thing that you have to do today is to go to like Twitch or any other kind of streaming platform, or to YouTube and click on a video, and already you have a live stream, you have a recording of any kind of casting that you really wish for, and in any game that exists. Back then it was completely different landscape. I mean, we didn't really have, YouTube wasn't as big as now, we didn't have any streaming platforms. Video streaming in that case just didn't exist. All we had was audio streaming. So it was pretty much like radio. You would tune into a cast by just opening up Winamp. The caster would also use Winamp and a plugin for that, which was, I think, called Shoutcast Source, something like this. So, and he would use that tool to just like stream a radio broadcast through everybody. So you couldn't really see anything. In WarCraft, I think after like 2 years, they developed a tool where you could simulate being an observer in the actual game, but you had to use the client for that as well. But up to that point it was only like audio casting, and of course we only had like 4 casters back then. That was, by the way, in the German scene. I don't really think that the English scene was very interested in the WarCraft casts. We had a few casters, but they didn't like do it for too long. And when I started, there was just like Stone, MC Hotdog, Heaton and myself, and Magic 23 actually. So those few guys, like, we started with the broadcasting in Germany, and Germany was just back then like probably one of the biggest countries when it came to the WarCraft 3 streaming. And a lot of the guys just stopped after a while because, well, there was no money in it, right? So it was just like a hobby. It was a free time thing that we all did. And I actually did it for a very, very long time. But at the beginning, it was just one of those things where you had like a cast every 2 or 3 weeks, because you had only one server. The server was used by a few Counter-Strike people as well. So people were really looking forward to it. You know, every single time there was a broadcast announced, everybody was hyped for it, and they knew when the matches would start. The professional scene, the tournament scene wasn't as evolved as it is today, but everybody was really looking forward to it. So you couldn't just simply cancel one. And that's exactly where it all started for me, because, well, I wasn't a caster, but I was working on a website, and I was already like in the WarCraft 3 competitive scene. I was running tournaments as an admin. I was also like running my own team, my own clan, so it was all pretty exciting. But there was like one cast, and the guy who was supposed to like run the broadcast, he suddenly got sick, and it was just a last notice thing. So everybody was just like asking, hey, who can replace the caster? Because, well, we don't have anybody that can actually do it. We announced that 2 weeks ago. Everybody is hyped for it, everybody is excited, and we can't just simply cancel. So they asked in the channel back then, of course, everything in German. They just asked like, okay, who thinks he can really do a good job with that, or wants to give it a shot? And I was just sitting in front of my PC and was like, well, talking about the game that I love and that I know, why not? Let's give it a try. So I basically just told them that I would be interested, and immediately someone called me over the phone and tried to explain to me everything that kind of I had to do. The funny thing is that we didn't even know if I was actually live. So at some point we just thought, okay, I think it's working now, but I don't know. But the game was starting, so I didn't have any prep time or anything. So I just like sat there and was just like, I had my headset on, and I was just saying like, okay guys, screw it. I think everybody can listen, can hear me now. If not, then I'm probably going to make a fool out of myself in my own room, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to cast the game right now, and let's see if you guys can actually hear me. Turns out they could, and they were pretty like hyped about it. So people were really happy, and they liked the way that I casted. And from that point on, I was just like asked over and over again to cast other games, other tournaments and leagues, and it was pretty cool. And so that was when the whole thing started for me. You know, of course, with time it started to grow a bit, but there was still no money. And I finished school, I went to university, but I never really gave up on the casting, and I just followed through with that. And it got a bit bigger. I had like 1 or 2 appearances in German TV when like those niche programs, and actually some of the privates also wanted to like do short episodes or short sections about casting and about gaming in general, which was always fun. We had a couple of big conventions as well. Back then it was still in Leipzig, I think, where for the first time I was actually sitting at a venue with like 2,000-3,000 people in front of me, and it was just like the best feeling in the world, you know, like cracking a joke and everybody was just laughing. It was so damn good. It was just amazing. So for me it was always one of these things that I did like in my free time, and I put a lot of time into that. And as I mentioned, back then there was no money in it because, well, the video boom and all the bandwidth, it wasn't there just yet. So it was always just like broadcasting as an audio stream. Sometimes we had video streams, but for that you had to have a really more elaborate setup, and you couldn't usually handle that as a private person. So it was more of a studio thing where a few of the smaller companies had that. So my wish or my dream was always to become like a professional caster at some point. But as I said, like I was still at university, so I finished my degree, and afterwards it was always the idea to at least go into esports for 1 year. I told myself that, well, for 1 year would be alright to just like everything pass, not earn a lot of money. I knew that it would make just barely nothing going into esports full time, but I wanted to give it a shot to have no regrets later on. And that was also the time when I started to transition into English, because up to this point everything was just in German, right? But there was a broadcast, and it was assembly back then. I was streaming that, and that was already when that entire like video thing hit, you know, when we suddenly had the bandwidth where we could finally stream video. So back then I was streaming in German assembly, and I realized that a lot of people were actually just like hopping onto my stream, and that the viewer numbers increased like a lot. And I couldn't really figure out why, until somebody told me in chat, hey dude, listen, like most of the people that watch you right now don't even understand what you're saying, because they are coming from the English stream that is apparently having technical difficulties. So everybody is currently watching you. And at that point I just like started to talk in English. I mean, the broadcast was still in German, but between the games I would just like tell people what was going on, where we were in the bracket, what the next game was going to be. And I just read chat, and suddenly everybody was like, what the hell's going on? The guy can actually talk English, so he should broadcast in English. He should actually run a couple of English casts. There was StarCraft 2, of course. WarCraft 3 at that point already started to decline pretty heavily. StarCraft was the new thing, the big deal. And yeah, Team Liquid did an interview with me where they also talked about me potentially casting in English, and I gave it a shot. People really liked it, and shortly afterwards there was an opening in Korea casting for GOM TV, and I applied for that. And they invited me over. They said like, all right, listen, we would really like to have you here. We need more English casters, and how would you feel about coming here for 3 months and just giving it a try? And of course I loved that. I always wanted to go to Asia, always wanted to like see the Asian culture and everything, and just live there for a bit. So I immediately said yes, and went over there. And only like I think 3 days in, they asked me, hey, we really like what you're doing. We've been following your stuff for some time now, and we would like to have you here for longer. So instead of like 3 months, I stayed 3 years and focused heavily on the live casting for GOM. I did a bit of YouTube stuff besides that as well, but I never really had a big focus on YouTube until I came back to Germany. It was in 2015, actually, at the end of the year. And when I started to switch over to Heroes of the Storm, because I just said like, all right, I come back to Germany. It's a bit of a new beginning for me. I want to focus more on my YouTube channel, also on my Twitch channel, my personal live streaming. And with that, it just makes sense to go into a new game and just start with a new game, because all of those StarCraft channels are already established for a long time. So if I really want to focus on my own thing, it makes just like sense to start with something new there. And well, that's basically the story how it happened. So in the end, it was all coincidence. If you want to become a caster today, you have a lot more opportunities, but at the same time, of course, the competition is much fiercer. So it's very different. But for me back then, it all came down to a guy becoming sick and people asking, hey, who could replace him? And then it was just like a very years of casting besides my studies, and just putting a ton of time in and trying to develop the scene, especially of course in Germany. They're setting the infrastructure for esports. And I did not only do the casting, but also a lot of like tournament admin. I ran several leagues back then, some of the biggest ones, and I even had a casting team that I was trying to teach, where we brought new people in, new blood, and we're just like looking, okay, how many casters can we actually get out of this, so that we can just like cover more things. Today, of course, that's not really a problem. There's a ton of casters out there, but back then it was very, very different. And I think a few people might still be around that know the audio streams, and it was just basically like radio, and it was really fun, very different from today. And in the beginnings, if somebody would have told me, okay, listen, in like 10 years you're going to be one of the casters out there that makes a living out of that is able to just live off YouTube, of live streaming and of going to events, I would have called them crazy. But I'm pretty happy. I have the best job in the world probably, and I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys today. So I hope that you enjoyed that little story, and of course I know that a few people always have questions about how I started with all of this. If you have any questions whatsoever, guys, just drop a quick comment into the YouTube comments and I will address those. So if there are some questions that you always had that you wanted to ask me, that's the time to write them down. If you like the videos, give them a thumbs up, and guys, I'm going to see you soon on Khaldor TV once again here on YouTube.